For most of human history, there was no real way to know for certain that someone was dead. No pulse monitors, no doctors, no machine that beeps once and confirms it's over for good. Just a body that stopped moving and a group of terrified humans standing over it, trying to figure out if their friend was really gone or just lying there very, very still. And honestly, that uncertainty wasn't some small inconvenience, it was constant. Because death in the ancient world rarely looked peaceful, it looked confusing. A person could be unconscious from blood loss, frozen stiff from the cold, paralyzed by a snake bite, or just stuck in some kind of coma nobody even had a name for yet. To untrained eyes, all of those can look exactly like death. So the real question here isn't just how ancient humans buried their dead, it's how they even knew there was a body to bury in the first place. And weirdly enough, the answer starts somewhere you wouldn't expect. Not with humans at all, with insects. See, long before humans even existed, evolution had already solved this problem once. Ants, termites, and cockroaches can detect death almost instantly, and not by sight, but by smell. The moment an insect dies, its body starts leaking fatty acids, mainly oleic acid and linoleic acid. Other insects pick up on that scent right away and react immediately. Ants will actually drag the corpse away from the colony, termites will seal it off completely. Scientists call these chemicals necromones, which is basically just a fancy way of saying the smell of death. And this isn't some guess either. Researchers have sprayed oleic acid onto completely healthy living ants, and the other ants tried to carry their still moving, very much alive nestmate straight to the trash pile. The smell alone was enough to convince them it was dead. Now scale that idea way up. As bodies break down, they release two compounds with genuinely unpleasant names, putrescine and cadaverine. Both were first identified by a German physician back in 1885, and both are largely responsible for what we now just casually call the smell of death. Human noses can pick up on them too. So the very first way any creature on Earth, including our own ancestors, ever knew that death had occurred wasn't really a thought at all. It was a smell. Chemistry, not consciousness. But here's the thing. Smelling death and actually understanding death are two completely different things. And somewhere along the evolutionary timeline, a second stage shows up: emotion. A researcher named Paul Pettit over at Durham University has spent years studying exactly when this shift happened, and he's mapped it out into stages. After chemical detection came something a lot stranger: grief. Elephants, for example, are known to return to the bones of dead herd members, sometimes years later, gently touching the skulls with their trunks. Magpies have been filmed gathering around a dead bird, calling out almost like an alarm. And chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, react in ways that are honestly kind of hard to watch. In one documented case, after a wild chimp fell to its death out of a tree, the rest of the group screamed, ripped up plants, and threw rocks around in what looked like pure panic. In another case, a mother chimp was actually filmed using a blade of grass to clean the teeth of her dead infant, grooming a tiny body that was never going to move again. Researchers who studied this came to a pretty chilling conclusion. With enough experience, chimps clearly learn that dead means that individual is never waking up. But there's no real evidence they understand that death is coming for them too. So they can recognize death in others, they just can't predict it for themselves. Humans, though, crossed that final line, and the evidence for it is buried quite literally in some of the strangest places archaeologists have ever found. Up in northern Spain, there's a cave called Cima de los Huesos, which translates to the pit of bones. It sits more than a quarter-mile underground, only reachable through narrow pitch-black passages. Inside, researchers found the remains of at least 28 individuals, ancient relatives of Neanderthals, dated to around 430,000 years ago. Something or someone carried those bodies deep into a cave that takes real effort just to enter, let alone navigate. There's a similar mystery sitting in South Africa in a chamber called Denelady, only accessible by climbing down a nearly 40-foot vertical shaft in total darkness. Inside that one, more than 15 individuals from a species called Homo naledi. And neither location really makes sense as an accident. Nobody falls 40 feet underground by chance, let alone more than once. Some scientists argue these were the earliest deliberate burials in the entire human story, long before anyone could write, farm, or build a single permanent structure. Others remain pretty skeptical, arguing the bone patterns actually look more consistent with natural accumulation than intentional burial. So the debate is very much still alive. But here's what isn't up for debate. Going to that kind of effort for a body means somebody, somewhere, understood that the body still mattered. And the proof actually gets even more specific than that. At Shanidar Cave over in Iraq, archaeologists found Neanderthal skeletons dating back 60 to 70,000 years, in some cases placed in deliberately dug depressions, with stones positioned right near the head, possibly as some kind of marker. One individual, known as Shanidar I, had survived a withered arm, partial blindness, and pretty severe head trauma, the kind of injuries that should have killed him fast in a world with zero medicine. Instead, he lived for years afterward. Someone fed him, someone protected him. That's not an accident, that's care, for someone everyone around him could clearly see was dying, long before death actually showed up. Which kind of means the line between caring for the living and preparing for the dead might not have been a line at all. It may have just been one continuous act of paying attention to a body that other people simply refused to walk away from. So by this point, humans clearly understood death on a biological level. But the strangest twist in all of this comes later, when death stopped being just a fact and started becoming a performance. Over in Russia, at a site called Sungir, archaeologists uncovered the graves of two boys and a middle-aged man dated to the Upper Paleolithic, roughly 30,000 years ago. The bodies were buried with spears, ivory figurines, a bone deliberately packed with red pigment, and get this, more than 13,000 carved mammoth ivory beads sewn right across their clothing. That is not someone hiding a corpse out of disgust. That's someone spending an enormous amount of time and resources on a person who could no longer benefit from any of it. Which means at some point, deep in the Ice Age, humans stopped asking, is this person dead? And started asking something completely different. What happens to them now? And once that question existed, there was really no going back. Every funeral, every gravestone, every rest in peace ever carved into stone since then traces all the way back to a small group of ancient humans standing over a body, using nothing but smell, instinct, and grief to figure out what modern medicine now confirms in seconds. Today, a machine tells you someone is gone. Back then, all you had was the silence where breathing used to be, and people who simply refused to look away.